This is A Verse, a podcast about poetry, which really means this is a podcast about life, words, beauty, nature, love, loathing, longing, loss, rhythm, and rhyme, about everything and nothing, and all that falls between. So this week is Valentine's Day week. Valentine's Day is a holiday loved by some and loathed by some, kind of like poetry. I fall into the middle. I am neither a lover nor a loather. Rather, I think of Valentine's Day as merely yet another made-up commercial holiday. And yet, how can I not celebrate a day when people are focusing on love? In my first episode of this podcast, I talked about Shakespeare's description of love. Love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no, it is an ever-fixed mark. And I thought then, as I have so many times, how challenging that kind of love is for so many of us humans. I think that's why folks have trouble with Valentine's Day, a holiday that celebrates something so fallible as human love. So instead, I want to celebrate love with the big L, unconditional, infinite love, which truly alters not when it alteration finds. Thus, I am dedicating this week's podcast to my Valentine, my dog Allie, along with all of my past dogs, but especially Jack, Daisy, and Tucker. So let's jump right in with a poem by Ogden Nash. Many of you may have heard an Ogden Nash poem without knowing who wrote it. For example, candy is dandy, but liquor is quicker. Over the course of his lifetime, Ogden Nash became a much-loved writer of what is called light verse, poetry that purposely never pretends to be pretentious. And yet, as I hope you'll see in this poem by Nash, light does not mean without emotion or meaning. The poem is called The Dog. The truth I do not stretch or shove when I state that the dog is full of love. I've also found, by actual test, a wet dog is the lovingest. Clever, clever, clever. Nash makes us smile and then laugh, and so captures the glorious paradox of our human love of dogs. We tolerate in them what we would never tolerate from a human partner, the glorious mess of being a dog owner. Why? Because they love us, and so we love them, which actually is the whole point. Their love reminds us of what love is all about. It's about loving without alteration, even when it alteration or wet dogness finds. Even when we get covered in mud and sloppy kisses, even picking up their poop. Which leads me to our next poem. One in a similar vein, but with more context and depth, is this poem by Howard Nemerov, not known generally as a purveyor of light verse. However, this one is called Walking the Dog. Two universes mosey down the street, connected by love and a leash and nothing else. Mostly, I look at lamplight through the leaves while he mooches along with tail up and snout down, getting a secret knowledge through the nose almost entirely hidden from my sight. I love this so much, connected by love and a leash and nothing else. Allie and I walk at least 5 miles every day together, connected by love and a leash and precious little else. I take in the world through my eyes, she through her nose, and yet, if I am to love her like she loves me, I have to find the patience for her scent-induced raptures over fire hydrants and other dogs' poop piles, when I would far rather be heading toward a beautiful view. Nemerov goes on, We stand still while he's enraptured by a bush, till I can't stand our standing anymore and haul him off. For our relationship is patience, balancing to this side tug and that side drag, a pair of symbionts, contented not to think each other's thoughts. Oh, how Nemerov captures the friendly battles of alleys in my morning walks. We stand till I can't stand our standing anymore. And indeed, I am not so content not to think about why she loved that pile of garbage, and equally relieved that she has no opinion whatsoever about my own mental piles of garbage, my stresses and strains and failures. He goes on, what else we have in common's what he taught. Our interest in shit. We know its every state, from steaming fresh through stink to nature's way of sluicing it down street dissolved in rain, or drying it to dust that blows away. We move along the street, inspecting shit. Indeed, I do. I spend a lot of time inspecting shit on my walk. His sense of it is keener far than mine, and only when he finds the place precise, he signifies by sniffing urgently and circles thrice about and squats and shits, whereon we both, with dignity, walk home. And just to show who's master, I write the poem. Oh my God, the best ending. For yes, this is the goal of the walk, some way, to let Allie do her business. Yes, this is a poem about shit. And twice a day at least, I stop focusing on me long enough to let myself focus on her, to let her focus on her, which is to say, to focus on, yes, shit. But just to show who's master, I read this poem to you. So what do both of these poems have in common? Well, the through line of this podcast, of course, love. And so since it is Valentine's weekend, of course, we must dive into the Romantic poets. The Romantic movement, which began in the late 18th century and continued to midway through the 1800s, was a reaction against all that rationalism of the Enlightenment. The most famous Romantic poets, Wordsworth, Keats, Coleridge, Shelley, Blake, wrote prompted by what Wordsworth called the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. It takes its origin in emotion, recollected in tranquility. The emotion is contemplated till, by a species of reaction, the tranquility gradually disappears, and an emotion, kindred to that which was before the subject of contemplation, is gradually produced, and does itself actually exist in the mind. So Romanticism as a spiritual practice. And among the most famous of all the Romantic poets was Lord Byron. And so who better and what better to share on this Valentine's podcast than a Romantic poet's poem? And this is Lord Byron's Epitaph to a Dog, his dog. Near this spot are deposited the remains of one who possessed beauty without vanity, strength without insolence, courage without ferocity, and all the virtues of man without his vices. So isn't that in a nutshell unconditional love? And as Byron shows us so beautifully in this poem, that's what dogs give us. All the virtues of man, the things we want to think ourselves to be without our vices. He goes on, this praise, which would be unmeaning flattery if inscribed over human ashes, is but a just tribute to the memory of Bosun, a dog who was born in Newfoundland, May 1803, and died at Newstead, November 18th, 1808. Just reading that actually made me cry, that date was so important to him and the memory of this dog. He goes on. When some proud son of man returns to earth, unknown to glory but upheld by birth, the sculptor's art exhausts the pomp of woe, and storied urns record who rests below. When all is done, upon the tomb is seen not what he was, but what he should have been. But the poor dog, in life the firmest friend, the first to welcome, foremost to defend, whose honest heart is still his master's own, who labors, fights, lives, breathes for him alone, unhonored falls, unnoticed all his worth, denied in heaven the soul he held on earth. Well, wouldn't Byron be pleased to know that there are now cemeteries exclusively dedicated to our beloved pets? I have visited many of them, and they always move me to tears. One I would walk through every day on a country estate in Wales where I was staying, where all the pets from that estate were buried over the years. Another, the first in America, is in Hartsdale, New York, and I love to walk through it, sobbing often, as I read on their headstones how much their people loved these cats and dogs. Byron continues, while man, vain insect, hopes to be forgiven and claims himself a sole exclusive heaven, O man, thou feeble tenant of an hour, debased by slavery or corrupt by power, who knows thee well must quit thee with disgust, degraded mass of animated dust. Thy love is lust, thy friendship all a cheat, thy tongue hypocrisy, thy words deceit, by nature vile, ennobled, but by name. Each kindred brute might bid thee blush for shame. Ye, who behold perchance this simple urn, pass on it, honors none you wish to mourn. To mark a friend's remains, these stones arise. I never knew but one, and here he lies. I love this ending. Byron calls we humans out on all our vanity, despite knowing how problematic all our lives have become. And given that, is it any wonder that we actually struggle to love one another? It's hard enough to love ourselves. And yet we try in vanity. But then Byron acknowledges what is the sweetest, saddest truth of that poem, that he has only really ever known one true friend, his dog. It's said that when Byron found out his dog had rabies, he nursed him and never left his side, even though rabies was contagious and people put dogs down. So much did he love his dog Bosun. And we, over 200 years later, remember that. Through poetry, I might add. Perhaps the most beloved contemporary poet of our era is Mary Oliver, and she has written countless beautiful poems about the dog she loved. I want to share two with you. The first is called Percy Wakes Me. Percy wakes me, and I am not ready. Now he's eager for action, a walk, then breakfast. He is sitting on the kitchen counter where he is not supposed to be. How wonderful you are, I say. How clever. If you needed to wake me, to wake me. He thought he would hear a lecture, and deeply his eyes begin to shine. He tumbles onto the couch for more compliments. He squirms and squeals. He has done something that he needed, and now he hears that it's okay. I scratch his ears. I turn him over and touch him everywhere. He is wild with the okayness of it. Then we walk. He has his breakfast. And he is happy. This is a poem about Percy. This is a poem about more than Percy. Think about it. Think about it. This is a poem about the simplicity of love and life that we humans experience with and because of our dogs, who help us remember not only love, but how simplifying our lives, how just loving one another, even if they're doing something they're not supposed to be doing, makes us all remember that all we are here to do is to love and be grateful for what is all around us. To me, this poem should be required reading during this pandemic, because Then we walk. Then he has his breakfast. Then he is happy. That's actually how I feel each morning. Then Allie and I walk. Then we both have our breakfast. And then we are both happy. That's when I remember to be and to love. Here's one more by Mary Oliver about her dog, Luke. I had a dog who loved flowers. Briskly she went through the fields, yet paused for the honeysuckle or the rose, her dark head and her wet nose touching the face of every one with its petals of silk, with its fragrance rising into the air where the bees, their bodies heavy with pollen, hovered. And easily she adored every blossom, not in the serious, careful way that we choose this blossom or that blossom, the way we praise or don't praise, the way we love or don't love, but the way we long to be that happy in the heaven of earth, that wild, that loving. Oh my God, isn't that the most beautiful poem? Oh, if we could all just be more like our dogs and adore our world for exactly what it is, not what we wish it would become to shape and mold it to our human wills. Because when we can remember to be grateful and adore what is, we remember that all any of us want to be is that wild, that loving, that happy in the heaven of earth, as Luke was. And so we will conclude today's podcast with one of the great love poets of the 20th century, Pablo Meruda. Ricardo Eliezer Neftali Reyes Basso Alto, better known by his pen name and later legal name, Pablo Meruda, was a Chilean poet, diplomat, and politician, and he later won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1971, and he wrote some of the most famous contemporary love poems. This is one of those love poems. My dog has died. My dog has died. I buried him in the garden next to a rusted old machine. Someday, I'll join him right there. But now he's gone, with his shaggy coat, his bad manners, and his cold nose. And I, the materialist, who never believed in any promised heaven in the sky for any human being, I believe in a heaven I'll never enter. Yes, I believe in a heaven for all dogdom, where my dog waits for my arrival, waving his fan-like tail in friendship. Sorry, I can never read that without crying. But isn't that what dogs do to us all? They just tear down all our rationality and reason, our seriousness and our big plans, and they crack our hearts open with their love. I'll not speak of sadness here on earth, of having lost a companion who was never servile. His friendship for me, like that of a porcupine withholding its authority, was the friendship of a star, aloof, with no more intimacy than was called for, with no exaggerations. He never climbed all over my clothes, filling me full of his hair or his mange. He never rubbed up against my knee like other dogs obsessed with sex. No, my dog used to gaze at me, paying me the attention I need, the attention required to make a vain person like me understand that being a dog, he was wasting time. But with those eyes so much purer than mine, he'd keep on gazing at me with a look that reserved for me alone all his sweet and shaggy life, always near me, never troubling me, and asking nothing. I love this poem so much because it reminds me that dogs are our bodhisattvas, come here to earth to teach us how to love. I think of that often with my Allie. Ask anyone I've loved or who's had the challenge of loving me, and they will tell you that I am kind and considerate and nice enough, but rather remote. I come from a family of air kissers and TP huggers. I was punished, yes, punished, if I cried. So I'm not a toucher or a crier, although I'm crying right now. But Allie, who snuggles up so close to me that I feel every rib and every hip bone. Oh my God, how I adore her proximity. And so I stop, whatever it is I'm doing all the time, to rub her belly and scratch under her ears and look into her brown eyes and tell her how much I love her and how grateful I am for her. She alone is teaching me what so many others despaired of my ever learning: the simple affection of sharing love. How many times have I envied his tail as we walked together on the shores of the sea in the lonely winter of Isla Negra, where the wintering birds filled the sky and my hairy dog was jumping about full of the voltage of the sea's movement, my wandering dog sniffing away with his golden tail held high, face to face with the ocean's spray. Joyful, 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 as only dogs know how to be happy, with only the autonomy of their shameless spirit. What a beautiful poem. Joyful, joyful, joyful. Allie's had this habit since puppyhood. Whenever we enter a crosswalk, and how she knows it's a crosswalk, I have no earthly idea, she begins to pogo stick jump, trying to get the handle of her leash. It actually took me a moment to figure out that's what she wanted, but now, in every crosswalk, no matter what, I hold that handle so that it dangles down a little from the leash, but just out of reach, and she jumps and jumps and jumps until finally I lowered enough, and she gets it, and she bounds off. Joyful, joyful, joyful. And out of the corner of my eye, I always see the cars stop for us as we cross and the people inside them smiling. I've seen the drivers of Maseratis in Beverly Hills rushing from pillar to post stop and smile. Truck drivers, garbage collectors, people in the biggest hurry of their lives all stop and smile or laugh in the pure joy of Allie's pure joy. Joyful, joyful, joyful. And finally, the end of this poem. There are no goodbyes for my dog who has died, and we don't now, and never did, lie to each other. So now he's gone, and I buried him. And that's all there is to it. That was Allie's little squeak, her editorial comment there. But you see, as this poem shows, that isn't all there is to it. Not for Neruda, not for any of us who have loved a dog. Each of the dogs I have loved since childhood, Prudence and Pasquale, Paisley and Puffy, all are Price dogs with a P, the adult dogs of my childhood, Daisy and Tucker, Jack and Nina and Allie, they have never stopped living in my heart. And my current Valentine, my Allie, who has lived as a nomad with me on the road since she was 10 weeks old, who lives with me during this pandemic in a town where we stopped and know no one, she quite literally is my only companion here. So together we spend every day, and every single day she teaches me something I need to know about unconditional love and how to love better. If I could write a poem to her, I would. I can only hope that whatever it is that dogs feel from us, she feels how much I love her and how unbelievably grateful I am for all she is teaching me every single day about unconditional love. Because every day Allie speaks Shakespeare to me. She teaches me that love is not love, which alters when it alteration finds, or bends with the remover to remove. Oh no. It is an ever-fixed mark that looks on tempests and is never shaken. Thank you for listening to A Verse a podcast about poetry for the lovers and the loathers. And happy Valentine's Day to the lovers and the loathers. I hope you enjoyed this podcast about life, words, beauty, nature, love, loathing, longing, loss, rhythm, and rhyme, about everything and nothing and all that falls between, and especially, most especially,